So there's a new addition to the MindMeld collection, the ShapeMaster, a unique module that allows us to draw shapes and use them for modulation, sequencing, sidechaining, and even as full voices. This is going to be a long video because there's so much to explore, but there are timestamp links in the description so you can jump between the different sections and patching ideas. Now there are two versions, the ShapeMaster Pro, which is commercial and comes with 2 expanders and the ability to sync to an external clock, and there's also a free version you can try. For this video I'm using a pre-released version, so there might be a few small changes in the final release. In any case, there's a beautiful manual you can refer to, and in general this module is really intuitive to use and very visual. So let's really have a look at a few patching ideas. So let's start with the basic functionality, a VCA with a built-in envelope generator. We have 8 VCA inputs, a trigger and or gate input for each, VCA outputs, and the CV outputs for the envelope. So I have here a blick from Volt. It's being sequenced by the grid sequencer. So let's send it to the first VCA input, and from the VCA output to the mixer. And it runs already unsynced, but we can change this to work with the triggers from the sequencer. So under trigger, we have trigger gate, and now it waits for a trigger. So let's use the triggers from the sequencer. And now we can either change the length here, and this will go up to half an hour, which is quite cool. Or we can have this also synced to the clock. So let's connect a clock to this, and maybe also the reset. And now let's turn sync on, and again sync is only available in the commercial version. Now the ShapeMaster needs a higher clock resolution, so let's use a 48 ppqn. So I will just multiply the clock by 48, just like this. And now again we can change the length. This time you can see that it's note length, so we have quarter note, half, a bar. Here we have also all sorts of triplets, dotted, and other lengths. Let's go with the quarter, stay with the quarter note. So again, we have a VCA with a built-in envelope that we can sync and change its duration, and we can also change and draw its shape just by dragging this here. So let's create something like an AD envelope. Can even change the response a bit, exponential, logarithmic. Let's also turn off the lock, this function here, so it will work better with the triggers from the sequencer. And now we can add more stages. By double clicking I can add a stage, or if I right click we can add a point. It's called point here. So I can add points just like this, or by holding Alt, or I guess it's option on the Mac, I can snap them to the grid so they stay in sync with the clock. Something like this. This is quite nice. Let's add a delay to this. I have here ChronoBlob 2, so I will send it from the VCA to ChronoBlob 2. And then to the mixer. Yes. Now again, we get the envelope as an extra signal here from the CV output. So if I connect this to the scope, you can see we have the same shape that we have here on the ShapeMaster. We have it on the scope. So we can use this, for example, to change the pulse width of blick and maybe also the wave. So there's a bit more movement. So it's really easy to get interesting results quickly. I have here another voice with the TSL from Instruo. It's being sequenced in this case from sample and hold. This I'm mixing with the mixer from Count Modular. It's going through tangents. And I have here channel 2 on the ShapeMaster. I have here already a shape, a sort of a fade-in shape. It's again set to sync with the lock off. And I have it in gate control mode, you can see it here, which means that it will wait for a gate to scan through the envelope. And I have it set to a repetition of 1. So basically it's a one-shot envelope. So I will use a clock division of 32. I have here a clock divider from Count Modular, and I will gate this channel. And I will connect the voice from the filter to the VCA input. And I have here another delay, so this will go first of all to Chronoblob and again to the mixer. So let's wait for it. So we get a one-shot sequence in time with the clock, in this case with the clock division. Let's wait for it one more time. Right, so I'm using ShapeMaster just to fade in this voice, and from there it's going to a delay. I also have here a bass. So I'm mixing a few oscillators. In this case, it's the Basel and Blick oscillators from Volt. And I have here another envelope which is synced, and it's running in ping pong mode. I have the length on 1 bar, a triplet, 1 bar triplet, so 2/3. And again, this is running in ping pong mode. As you can see, we can change the forward, reverse, or ping pong. And this is going through a filter. There's another thing I want to show you with ShapeMaster as a VCA. First of all, it's polyphonic, so you can use polyphonic signals with it, like I'm doing here. I have the note sequencer from JW. It's sequencing polyphonically Blick from Volt, and the ShapeMaster is shaping its amplitude to sound like this. It's also going through a Freak for some filtering. Now there are a few interesting controls we can experiment with. So first of all, we can change the phase of the shape. You can see it's really visual. We can also change the response from exponential, linear, and logarithmic. We can also push and pull this shape with the warp function. And there are more controls that we will look at later in the video, but all of those are also controllable via control voltage, via CV. And for this we have the expander, this one here. Again, the expanders are available only for the commercial version, and in this case with this expander you should place it on the left of the module. Now it's polyphonic, so you can use polyphonic signals to modulate the different channels, and there's a tool for that, the MindMeld, which will look like this. With this module we can send modulation to all the 8 channels separately. So I will use the sample and hold from Mokba with the new slew expansion to modulate the phase, let's say. So I will name this phase, and I will send the first channel to the first channel of the MindMeld, because this is the channel I want to modulate, and from there it will go to the phase CV input. And already you can see we have something going on. Let's do this also for the response. We'll use another channel, and this will go to the response CV input. And you can see here, this is also being modulated. And maybe also to the warp. So I will use again another channel, and this will go to the warp CV input. So we get even more movement and variation. And again, this will work the same for all 8 channels. Let's add some delay. I have a freak going through the chronoblob. For now it's all the way dry, but I can, yes, do this. And we can use now the CV output to modulate the filter even more. Very nice. Okay, let's add a kick drum. I have here plaits in the bass drum model. And I have a bass here with a percussive vibration being sequenced by the stochastic sequencer. Oh yeah. And I have here another ShapeMaster. Maybe I can zoom in a bit. In this case, I'm using noise, white noise through a bandpass filter, and this is going to the VCA of the first channel. And I have only 2 spikes here on the ShapeMaster, but I'm modulating the warp. So I have here another MicroMeld modulating the warp, and you can see this here. And this is going through some delay, so let's unmute this. Let's have a look now at ShapeMaster as a modulation source. I have here Terraform from Valley. It's being sequenced by the Sec3. Basically, I have one long sequence because I am switching between the 3 sequences of the Sec3. This is going through some delay, so let's listen to this and reset maybe everything. So this is the sequence. And I have here also ShapeMaster, so we can use, for example, channel 1 to modulate the wavetable of Terraform with the CV output. Again, we can make this modulation in sync with the clock. And now instead of drawing a shape, let's create something random. So first of all, I will click the random function. And now we have a few options, so we can set the minimum amount of segments, let's go with 3, and the maximum amount, let's go with something like 5. We can change the maximum curve of the shape, let's leave it at 100%. We can change also the 0 volt ratio, so how many segments will be at 0 volts, and the maximum ratio, so how many will be at maximum. Let's for now skip the stepped function, but we can lock the shape or the points to the grid, so it will stay in sync. Let's also skip quantization for now and hit randomize. Let's change the length to a bar. So now we have something random that, or randomized actually. And now we don't need to go again into this random menu. We can just hold Alt, and I guess it's an option on the Mac, and randomize it again and again until we get something interesting. Maybe something like this. And we can invert it with this button here. We can also reverse it. And we can copy paste it to a different channel. But for now, let's create a new modulation source on channel 2. And this we will use with a sort of a base. I have here the modulo sequencer sequencing the Blick oscillator. going through tangents. Let's unmute this. And I will modulate the filter with the second channel. Again, let's set it to sync. And in this case, let's choose a shape presets. So there are a few presets we can use, and of course you can save your own. Let's go with circadian sound, grooves, groove 1. We can change the response a bit. And we can even change the range of this envelope or modulation source. Now it's 0 to 10. We can change this to negative, positive 5 volts. There are also full presets, so channel presets that will include not only the shape, but also the different parameters, so you can experiment with that and save your own, of course. I have here a sample loaded on the complex simpler. This is going through a VCA and some delay. And I will use another channel. I have here channel 3. This is, in this case, I will zoom in a bit, it's unsynced and it's very long. You can see it's about a minute and a half. And again, this can go up to 30 minutes, which is great for drones and generative patches. So let's use this channel to modulate the VCA. Very nice. I also have here a sort of a solo. So I have the wave oscillator and I'm modulating its wavetable with the ShapeMaster, and it's also going through a VCA, which is being controlled with the ShapeMaster. So let's unmute this. And again, this is unsynced and it's about 23 seconds long. And I have here also another effect with a sine wave, which is being modulated and modulating its frequency and the VCA with the ShapeMaster. So here I have a channel for the FM sine. I have another channel for the VCA sine. They're all not in sync, or they're all unsynced. And I'm also using this to pan this sine wave. So let's listen to it. Another type of modulation is gating a signal. So here I have an FM voice with two FM operators that are playing a chord from the chord CV module from Aaron Static. It will sound like this. And I'm also sending the high frequencies to a delay, so I can do this. Now I have a trance gate preset loaded on the ShapeMaster. So if I use this with the levels of the FM operator, we have a gated chord. I have another channel set to modulate the FM depth. Something like this. So now all we need is drums. I have here again plaits as a kick drum. Let's reset everything. And I also have hi-hats from Hora. And the percussive vibration as a bass. And a snare from Proc. Another thing we can do with ShapeMaster is use it as a sequencer for both modulation and pitch. So I have here two Blick oscillators. I'm mixing them through tangents, and again this is going to the VCA on ShapeMaster and to the mixer. Now if I hold the Shift key, I can draw stepped modulation. So I can do something like this. Let's take them all down for a second. Right? We can also change the grid size if you want to go more granular. So let's say 32 steps, and then here we can do something like this. And we can also add some smooth to this, just so it's not so rigid. Very nice. Now if we go to channel 2, we can use it to sequence the cutoff of the filter, for example. So let's connect it from the CV output. And now let's use the randomized function, the random function here. I will activate the stepped, which means that now it will create stepped modulation. And let's randomize this. Again, let's add some smooth. Maybe even set it to be bipolar. And again, we can use this also for sequencing pitch. So here I have basal, sound like this. And I have a sequence set on channel 3. This we will use to control or modulate or sequence the timbre a bit. Just so we have some movement. And we will use channel 4 to sequence the pitch of basal. So let's first of all change the range from 0 to 10 to 0 to 1, so we have only one octave. And now each horizontal line on ShapeMaster is a semitone. So let's take everything down just like this, and by holding Control and Shift, I can create a quantized sequence. So let's send this to the pitch input. And let's just do something like this and then change it. Very nice. But we can also randomize a quantized sequence. So first of all, let's activate quantization in the random settings, and now we can choose even the scale, so we can activate or deactivate the notes we want or don't want. So I will deactivate C sharp, or let's say I will just leave C, D sharp, which is E flat, F, G, and A sharp, which is B flat. And now I can hit randomize. Something like this. So we have a sequence, a pitch sequence, the quantized pitch sequence. Let's copy this to channel 5 and let's set it already to run in reverse. And this will sequence the FM operator I have here. Let's just reset everything. So now the same sequence, just running in reverse, is sequencing the FM operator. I have here another channel for modulation for the feedback. And this is also great for sequencing drums. So here I have noise going to the first VCA on ShapeMaster, and you can see I have here a sort of a sequence with velocity already. Channel 2 is a sort of modulation for the reverb amount of this voice. You can see it here. I'm using the micro map. And I also have here another channel for sequencing kick or a kick drum with plaits. And another channel is sequencing a snare from proc. Or actually it's just controlling its amplitude. And here I have another sequencing an FM operator. It's a one-shot sequence. And of course, you can experiment with all sorts of different lengths for the different channels and create polymetric sequencing and modulation. So here, for example, I have psych going through tangents. This is the first channel that you can see here. I have here another channel which is coming from basal, and this has a different length. If I zoom in a bit, you can see the first channel has this length and the second one has 7/8, and it is exactly the same sequence but different length. I have here another channel for bleak, again going through a filter, again the same sequence but different length. And then here I have modulation for the filter of psych, and I have modulation for the bleak pulse width and bleak filter. Again, each of them has different length. You can see here 7/8, here 2 bars, and here we have half dotted bar. Then I have here another channel triggering knock as a kick drum. You can see again this is 7/8. So we get something a bit different already. And I have another one with 1 bar long, bringing in a snare. And with the expander, it's also possible to modulate the lengths and even randomize the shape. So here I have raids being sequenced by the ADDR sequencer going through vortex and to the VCA of the ShapeMaster. And already you can see that there are some things going on here. So first of all, I'm using MindMeld, so I can randomize the shape of 2 channels. One is for the VCA, one is for modulation for the filter. And I'm also using another ADDR sequencer, again through MindMeld, to sequence the length of the first channel. So this is how it will sound like. So it's randomizing the shapes and sequencing the length. Let's add some drums to this. Here again a kick drum from plaits. I have hi-hats from Hora, 2 snares from proc, and the bass with the grid sequencer and the percussive vibration. Let's have a look at another really interesting feature, sidechaining, and this is actually more of a slope/peak detector that we can use in all sorts of ways. So I have here a drum loop on the complex simpler. It will sound like this. And I also have bezel going through the ShapeMaster and also some delay. Now I have a shape set on the ShapeMaster that I can trigger once. This is basically the shape, a sort of an AD envelope. This is also, by the way, triggering sample and hold for pitch. And I want the drums to play this voice. So I will send the drums to the sidechain input that we have here and set this channel to be triggered by this sidechain signal. So we can set here sidechain. So again, this will work similar to a slope detector, so it will detect the changes in amplitude of the drums and will generate triggers accordingly. So let's see the sidechain signal on the scope. We can change it here and start lowering the threshold with this knob here so we can see what will affect this voice. Something like this. So now the louder parts of the drums are triggering this voice, and we have a few settings we can change here in this menu. So for example, we can change the gain, we can change the frequency. So if you want only the high frequencies or only the low frequencies to affect the signal, we can change the sensitivity. Another good idea is to turn off this lock for the clock sync, so it will work better with the triggers. Just like this. I have here another loop, a kick and a snare, just to add some depth to the sound. And I have another voice coming from Psych, going through a filter. And I have here a sort of a sequence set with this switch and 3 ref tone modules. And again, this is going to the ShapeMaster, this is channel 2. And I want to sidechain it also, but with the kick and snare sample. So we can use again the MindMeld, which is this one here. Let's call it, I will maybe zoom in a bit, let's call this side for sidechaining. And I will use the first loop to the first channel, and this will go back to the sidechain input. And the kick and the snare will go to the second channel, which is the one from Psych, and we will already get something going. So now the kick and the snare loop is triggering this voice, this Psych. And they are actually triggering this shape for the VCA. Now there's also the crossover feature, this one here, that lets us split the frequencies into highs and lows and affect only one of them. So let's set it to, let's say, about 600 Hz, somewhere here. And now we can let the high frequencies through, so only the low frequencies will be affected. And now when I do this, you can hear the high frequencies are always there. Only the low frequencies, what's below around 600 Hz, is being controlled by this envelope. I also have some hi-hats here, and I have also a shape ready on channel 3. So if I send those hi-hats to the VCA input of channel 3, I can also again use the kick and the snare to trigger them. This will be channel 3. And let's send this also to the mixer. So now they are actually being sidechained with the kick whenever the kick or the snare even is going through. Actually, it's just the kick. They will duck in volume. Okay, Okay, before we look at using the ShapeMaster as a full voice, I want to show you that it's also possible to scan through the shapes randomly, which is great for generative patches. So I have here the FM operator going through the ShapeMaster. This is how it will sound like. And now we can use CV to scan through this shape. So I have here walk from Bog Audio. You can see on the scope that it will output smooth random voltage. And I took the offset all the way up, so we get a unipolar signal, just the voltage, the positive voltage. And we can use this to scan through the shape. So let's set this under the trigger menu, CV playhead. And now I can connect walk to the trigger input. And you can see that it will randomly scan through this shape. I have here another channel set. This we will use for modulating the feedback amount on the FM operator. And I will use another walk to scan through it. So again, now 1 and 2 are being randomly scanned. Now I can also use the CV output of channel 1 to trigger sample and hold that will generate pitch information through a quantizer to the FM operator. Very nice. Now I want also to show you the triggers expander, this one here. This expander connects from the right of the ShapeMaster, and there are trigger outputs for each channel. There is an end of cycle output, and there are also outputs for the that relate to the sustain loop functionality. That works great with MIDI keyboards, for example, so you can have also a sustain segment for your envelope and so on. I will let you explore this feature yourselves. This video is long enough. But for now, let's use the end of cycle output. So I have here Blick from Volt going through a filter. Let's unmute this. It's this basically. And I have here and more modulation, another channel set on channel 3. So let's use this for the filter and maybe also for the pulse width of Blick. This is again 1.5 minutes long. And I will use the end of cycle of this channel to trigger a burst generator. I will show you exactly what it will do. So this will trigger the burst generator that will generate a burst of notes for the percussive vibration going through a delay. So let's wait for it. Maybe I can make it a bit quicker. And now. So again, this channel will end its cycle and it will send a trigger to trigger a burst generator that generates a burst of notes. So again, this is really nice for generative patches, having this running at different speeds, unsynced with one another. I have here another channel ready, channel 4, and I will use this to modulate the wave of Blick. Again, this is even longer. This is almost 2 minutes long. And I have even another one ready, channel 5, and this will control psych. So I have here psych from Instruo going through a filter and some delay. And I have the VCA, the VCA of psych all the way closed, and also the filter quite closed. So I will use this channel to open the VCA and also open the filter. And now to trigger this, envelope, I have it set to trigger gate, so it's waiting for a trigger, and I can use this output here, the OR end of cycle output that will output a trigger whenever each one of those channels is ending its cycle. So if I connect it, you will see that we have a sort of an issue. Let's wait for it to be triggered once by 4 or 3, let's say 4, I will make it a bit shorter. Have a look. So now it's triggered, and it will be triggered again and again, because again it's whenever each of the channels is ending its cycle, which means also when this channel ends its cycle it will trigger it again, but this is triggering itself basically. What I want is a one-shot loop. So what we can do, and this we didn't even look at this, we have settings for each of the channels. We can change the name, change the gain, and all sorts of different settings you can experiment with. But we have also here the SM triggers, and we can exclude this channel from the OR output. So it will not trigger itself. You see it stopped, and it will wait for channel 4 or 3 to end their cycle, and only then it will be triggered once. So let's wait for it again. So ShapeMaster can be also a really nice tool for generative patches. So now finally let's have a look at using the ShapeMaster as a full voice that tracks 1 volt per octave, has built-in timbre control, a filter. We can sequence it from within ShapeMaster. So first of all, let's change the length control to notes so we can tune this. Here we have again the length control. If I click it once, we have time, frequency, or note. And for now, let's send the CV output to the mixer and tune this to C4. You can see exactly if it's tuned or not. Very nice. So now we have a triangle wave, as you can see here, tuned to C4. And now we can create a sort of a PWM kind of movement with the swing control. Have a listen. We can change the timbre with the response. And also with the warp. And of course we can draw any shape we like, so we can make all sorts of weird shapes that might sound a bit painful, but it's fun. Let's do something like this actually. Maybe something like this. Very nice. Now let's sequence it. It will also track 1 volt per octave. So I already have the SMCV expander on the left, and I have MicroMeld that we will use for pitch. And I have here the grid sequencer that I will send to the MicroMeld and then to the volt per octave input, which is here on the expander. And we have our sequence. Maybe a bit less painful. Okay, now let's modulate a few things with smooth random signals. I have here 2 walk modules from Bog Audio. So first of all, let's modulate the swing. I have here MicroMeld ready. Again, this is channel 1, and from the MicroMeld it will go to the swing input of the expander. And let's modulate also the response, which is the timbre sort of. So we have some movement, and now what we can do, we can use ShapeMaster also as a VCA. So I will take the CV output to the VCA input of the second channel. And then this will go to the mixer. And if we will have a look at the second channel, I have it set to triggers, so it's waiting for an incoming trigger. Let's also sync it with the clock. So I will just send the clock and the reset, and now use the trigger outputs from the sequencer to trigger it. So we also have a trigger sequence. Now I have here also sample and hold that I want to use here, sample and hold I want to use to modulate the response of this envelope, so it will sort of change the decay. So I will send first of all the triggers to trigger the sample and hold from the sequencer, and then from there to the channel, to the second channel of the response MicroMeld. And now you can see here that it will modulate the envelope. And now if we go back to channel 1, we have a sort of a filter. Maybe I will make this a bit more bright, a bit brighter even. We have a sort of a low pass filter with a slew parameter, because it will smoothen out the shape, which means basically there will be less harmonics, which means it will act like a low pass filter. Just like this. So let's modulate this as well with sample and hold. I have here another MicroMeld set with a slew. So this will go to channel 1, and from there it will go to the slew CV input, which is here. And now it will modulate this, which is sort of a filter. Let's send this, maybe make it even brighter now that we have filter modulation. And maybe we can send it now to a delay. So after the VCA it will go to chronoblob and then to the mixer. Yes. Okay, now as we've seen before, we can also use ShapeMaster as a sequencer. So here I have another ShapeMaster, which will look like this. The first channel is the oscillator. The second channel is the VCA and Envelope for this voice. And here you can see I'm modulating the length with sample and hold, which means that we get sort of ratchets and stuff like this. And then the third channel is the sequencer. Let's actually listen to this already. Right, so we have here the sequencer. This will sequence the pitch. You can see channel 3 is going to a MicroMeld that is set for pitch, and this is going to the volt per octave input. So I'm using ShapeMaster as an oscillator, as an VCA, as a VCA and Envelope, and also as a sequencer for the pitch. And also as for modulation, I have here another channel to modulate the slew. So it's basically modulating sort of a low pass filter, and another channel is modulating the swing, which is again a sort of a PWM kind of sound. And all of this is coming from one ShapeMaster, which is quite cool. I have here also a bass. Also this is coming from the ShapeMaster. So I have here channel 1 is an oscillator, the VCO. And then I have here modulation for the slew, which is again a sort of a filter. And I have also modulation for the response to sound like this. So we have here another voice. Now Now this is going to VCA, and I will show you also in a second why. But I have here another voice, and this is a kick. So ShapeMaster can also be a kick. Again, I have channel 1 as the VCO, as the sound itself. The second channel is the amplitude modulation. So this is basically a sequence. The third channel is a pitch modulation. And here I could set the amount, so the strength of modulation, which is quite handy. And let's listen to this. I will solo this for a second. This is quite cool. And now this is why I have here the VCA, because I want to sidechain this bass to the kick. The easiest, you can do this within ShapeMaster. I think the easiest is just to add another VCA, external VCA. So I'm going to use the the amplitude modulation, which is channel 2. And I'm going to invert it. I have here the offset module from Bog Audio. I have the scale on -1, so it's inverted. And I'm also pushing it up so it will work with the VCA and will sidechain the bass, as you can see here now. And I'm also sending this kick to a delay, just for fun. So again, all of this, we have 4 voices coming from ShapeMaster as an oscillator, as a voice basically, with VCA, envelope, sequencing, filter, timbre control, PWM, whatever you want, it's there for you. So there is so much to explore with ShapeMaster. It truly is another masterpiece from MindMeld. I hope you enjoyed this video. Cheers.